Roberts.
I'm Chris Roberts.
And I'm Christina Kaiser from the Foundry Spiritual Center. We're grateful to have this time together and explore this topic of rest and renewal with all of you. So, a while back, I decided to start working on my own ability to kind of hang out and rest and pay attention to my body and all of these things. And in the middle of that, one day I realized in the middle of the afternoon, I'm really tired. I need to lay down for a little bit. And so I did. I laid down on the couch, and suddenly every person in my house was like, "Are you okay? What's the matter? Are you ill?" I was like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm just taking a moment. I'm just resting for a bit." And then another one comes by. "Are you sure? Are you sure you're okay?" You guys, I'm just taking a rest. And it made me realize how not often I actually rest, because all of these people could not believe that I would simply be resting. If I was laying down, I must be sick. And it really just told me something about how I was coming off to others and how I was spending my time. So, just to say, like, as we begin today, this is a real topic in my life.
Yeah, and maybe just building off of that, I think for me, this was going back several years. I was in bed one night reading a book, and this author listed 8 symptoms to know if you are dangerously tired. And I thought, well, I like a good list. So let me scan through this list that this author is offering. And I immediately nudged my husband and said, okay, you have to listen to this. And I reread the list. And between the two of us, we easily checked off every single thing on that list and then some. And I had a mixture of emotions in that moment. I think part of me felt a little bit embarrassed, like, okay, I should know better than this. And how did I get to the point where these little things were setting me off and I was so depleted and tired? But the other hand, I realized, okay, this isn't just about having a day off or going on vacation, that there was some soul level fatigue that I was experiencing. And I think this list and the combination of the two of us checking off all those points on the list was a real wake up call to me and an invitation into some deeper reflection. And so from that, thankfully, I had a group of people that I was able to process some of this with in a very non shameful way. And what I uncovered was some parts of my soul that were buried. And from that, really paying attention to sustainable rest and rhythm routines for my spiritual and emotional health. And so ever since that time, I've been on a journey to help others discover their deep need for rest on a soul level and to help create some sustainable practices.
Yes, so the term self care has become much more popularized today than it was even 10 years ago, and really gained traction as we became survivors of the pandemic. And so we've seen an increase in the number of corporations and businesses offering sabbaticals as a way of enticing potentially new hires. And so we have even begun to see some companies experimenting with the notion of a 4-day work week. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are still plenty of people who would roll their eyes at these types of things. So we easily may think some things like, be grateful you have a job, or quit complaining. And so, as we begin our talk about rest and renewal, it can be helpful to identify our paradigms of rest. And so, we have 4 paradigms of rest to consider: family of origin, spiritual background, culture, and personality. And so, taking family of origin, the families we grew up in, they largely influence the way that we think about work and rest. And I would consider my family borderline workaholics growing up. Work was emphasized all the time, and rarely, if ever, did we stop working.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I actually come from a family where both sides had created their own businesses, but that notion of a rest day, we'd call it a Sabbath day, it was huge in our family culture. So we would really shut things down at sundown on one night and take it all the way to sundown the next night. But there was a lot of what did that mean? A lot of that really meant napping. So there was really a specific way that all these adults were resting, which was not as fun for us kids and has precipitated a need for me to keep working it out. But the groundwork was there for building that pause into life.
Yeah, so definitely family of origin is an important piece as we're discovering our own paradigms of rest. I would say another one with spiritual background. Most, if not all, faith traditions talk about the importance of setting aside some sort of time regularly for rest. However, I find that few people actually practice it regularly. And I recall when I was in high school, I was on kind of this personal faith journey along with my older sister, and she was reading the Bible and discovered these like things of Sabbath and like once a week taking a day off. And so she said, "Do you want to try it with me?" And I thought, sure. And we realized that like nobody else was talking about this, nobody else was doing this. It was almost kind of this bonus part of a faith tradition rather than a tenet, a core tenet, which was surprising to me and actually became a core tenet later in my adult life. But interesting that I think it was talked about in the Bible, but rarely did we see people practicing that.
I heard someone give a lecture on the value of rest, and particularly taking a day away at a retreat center. And he said that often when people go on retreats, they sleep because their bodies are so worn out. And I didn't think it would apply to me. But sure enough, on my first day on retreat, I found myself sleeping. And thankfully, he gave me permission. And now spending money to take a nap is one of my favorite things to do.
I love that. So, right, our families and people around us, they tend to influence us. Our spiritual backgrounds, they play a part. And usually, popular culture also tends to find its way into affecting how we think about rest culture. Here in America, for many years now, probably we've all heard terms like, if you work hard enough, things will eventually work out. We have these ethics that have been kind of born into us a little bit.
And I actually grew up in a Greek immigrant family here in America, but I remember when I was 13 and we visited my relatives in Greece. And it was my first time there. We landed in Athens, went to my relative's house for lunch, and I'm a teenager. I'm excited to go shopping and see the sights. And my uncle said, "Oh, no, no, the shops are closed in the afternoon for several hours, and I'm actually going to take my nap. You can go there to the cot if you want to." And I thought, this is like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I do not want to sleep on a cot in the middle of the afternoon. However, the whole culture was shaped around this idea of a siesta and several hours off in the afternoon with extended lunch and rest time. Years later, as an adult, I went back to that defining moment as a teenager and realized, okay, American culture isn't the only culture. And there are a lot of cultures in the world that do take a pause in the afternoon. And I think it gave me permission as an adult to shape my schedule accordingly and to really take longer lunches to be a little bit more leisurely in the afternoon. And so that situation as a teenager actually became a defining moment with me through my culture.
And then one last thing we want to highlight in terms of paradigms is our personalities. For me, rest equals fun. It's important for me to incorporate fun. I don't like taking naps, but I do like being creative, listening to music, playing music, being out in nature are all practices that restore me. I know others in my family who like to sit with a book, reading and journaling. Another family member likes to create crafts and cook and use their hands. And I've had to learn over the years to make space for personalities different from mine.
That's a good one. And in different vein, but still up in there, perhaps we're the type of person who likes to take a step back, notice things more. So maybe you're the sort of person at a party, you're the one that kind of goes against the wall and you take it all in, you observe the situation. Or maybe you're the one at the museum that lingers a bit longer. Everybody else is ready to go, but you stay and you want to look and take it in more. Maybe you took up photography with your cell phone because we can do that now and we can notice things. So if it feels like you're the type of person that you need that nurturing time to linger and rejuvenate, that's also a part of it.
So, on that note, we would like to invite you to take a moment and to reflect on your own paradigms of rest that you recognize in your life. So, again, as a reminder, our family of origin, how has that shaped our view of rest, spiritual background, our culture, and our personality? So, we'll take a few moments to do that and lead us into part two.
So, having taken some time to think about what rest can look like in our lives, perhaps this is a good time to begin thinking more deeply about possible barriers to rest. And as great as rest sounds, most of us face barriers to rest. For instance, we might take into account our season of life.
And on one hand, this can be a super slippery slope because how many times have we probably heard people say, oh, if I just got this one thing, if this one thing happens, things will get better. Or I just need to get past this one moment and then things are going to calm down. I feel like I hear people say that all the time. Sometimes I say that. To add to that, sometimes seasons of life can show up in this family needs sort of a way. So maybe we were used to getting up a little bit early, we'd have our cup of coffee, we'd spend some time reading quietly. Life had this beautiful rhythm. And now maybe the whole family needs something. The house is really noisy first thing in the morning. And so now I need a different schedule. I need to get creative with my scheduling. And this can be true in all kinds of ways, right? We might have a busy season at work. What accommodations might that require if that's the case? Or maybe we're in a season of caring for a sick family member, any number of things. They become this catalyst for sort of having to reevaluate what are we going to do? How are we going to get the rest that we really need? Maybe we need sleep, you know? And so thankfully, having a little bit of permission can be helpful in all of that.
Maybe another area might be lack of attention to my body. Sometimes we're so used to pushing ourselves and making ourselves go, go, go that we're out of touch with our body's cues.
Yeah, and building off of that, I find that the need for decompression can be a barrier for me at times. And so sometimes at the end of the day, or maybe at the end of a week in particular, there's just a lot that I've taken in, and it's almost like there's energy stuck in my body and it feels heavy to me. And that need for decompression can be a barrier to me actually entering into a space of rest. Another barrier we can experience is a feeling of laziness.
And this one might seem strange to consider, right? Oh, I feel lazy. What is that? But the reality is that it happens. And so, what are we going to do when we think about sitting down with our journal or going out and taking that nature walk that we normally do? And we say to ourselves, I don't know, I just don't feel like it. So this happens sometimes. And what are we going to do when that's the case? Another one that many people tend to relate with is this feeling irresponsible or guilty. So oftentimes, and especially when we have a lot on our plates, even 10 minutes for ourselves can lead us to think, 10 minutes is a luxury I can't afford. I can't do that right now. What business do I have sitting down here and doing absolutely nothing? That's not right. And so, even though we're running at this pace that's probably causing us to work less efficiently, we just keep doing it because anything else simply feels irresponsible. It appears to be a luxury that we just can't justify.
Yes. And another barrier that I find exists in my life is overfilling the calendar. Life offers us such wonderful opportunities to connect: birthday parties, dinner invites, sporting events. The list goes on. And as great as all those things are, it can actually become a barrier if there's too much.
And so these are just a handful of examples of barriers that we've experienced. Maybe you resonate with some of these, or maybe there's other ones that come to mind as we consider this. And so rather than continuing on listing barriers, why don't we take a moment and to reflect on what are some limitations or barriers that you find in your life to rest? Because I think it's important to identify that in order to make a plan forward of how to overcome those barriers. So, as we go into our final part today, we'd like to talk about different types of rest. Now, the three of us live in Wisconsin, and in Wisconsin, we have lots of snow. And we've discovered that there's different types of snow. There's heavy snow, there's dusting, there's wet snow, there's packing snow. In fact, I read that Eskimos have 47 different words for snow, which I find interesting because it's so central to their life that they can't just call it snow. There's all different types of snow. And I think in the same way, that's what rest is like. There's not just a one size fits all rest, but there's lots of different ways in which we can relate to rest. And so, what we'd like to do is to offer this rest sheet, let my soul be at rest again, and to take a moment to take in some different synonyms or words for rest. Because we find that sometimes when we are engaging with a different word, there's a nuance, there's something that grabs our attention in a different way that might prompt an invitation for a next step for us. So, what we're going to do is we will take a moment and we'll read together the different words of rest, and then we'll offer some examples in our own lives and then an opportunity for some deeper reflection.
Rest, recess, silence,
Break, recreation, stop,
Quietude, standstill, time off.
ease, refreshment, calmness,
halt, reprieve, cessation,
Breather, vacation, comfort.
hush, hiatus, cut off,
relaxation, interruption, downtime,
Interlude, intermission, dreaminess.
leisure, release, nap,
let up, idleness, pause,
Let go, relief, peace.
tranquility, repose, lull,
motionless, siesta, respite. So, in reading this list, I would like to highlight the word lull. The word lull stood out to me. And when I think about lull, I think about traffic slowing down. I think about a pace that comes to a halt. And I like that. I like looking for areas in my life where things come to a halt. There's a lull in traffic and busyness.
Yeah, I think for me, as I read this list this time, and each time it's different when I sit with it, but this time the word cut off really stood out to me. And one of the things that I like to do is at the end of the week, when I'm entering into my day off, my day of rest, I have kind of a cutoff ritual that I do where, it's powering down the computer, shutting the computer and putting it away so that I don't see it for my time off. And so not like sort of bleeding from one thing to the next, but really having a distinct cutoff of I'm ending this and I'm starting this. And I was actually inspired by a friend of mine, and he used to work at a factory. And when the bell would ring for the lunch break, he would see if he could squeeze one more thing in, one more thing that he was making before the lunch break, and just felt this nudge of like, no, it's okay to cut off. Like, it's time for lunch. It'll be there when you return. You can come back to it later. And so that's what stands out to me today as I sit with this list.
And so, as we've had a chance to just hear the words, maybe now we'll take a little bit of time to sit with the list on our own a little bit. And as we do that, take some time to notice, are there any words here that are speaking to you more than the others, kind of calling out? And What might we add as we go from here in terms of a practice of rest? Is there anything that we feel called to move towards as we sit here today? So we'll give you a few moments.
And as we've highlighted today, rest isn't necessarily a one size fits all spiritual practice. Here at Boundary Spiritual Center, we hope that this meditation on rest and renewal was helpful today. And if you'd like to dive more into this subject, there's a couple of different ways that we would love to engage with you. First off, I'd love to invite you to check out our podcast, The Contemplative Life. This is a weekly podcast where we dive into topics of contemplative spirituality and practices. And in particular, if you want a specific episode that might be relevant, we encourage you maybe as a start to check out episode 82, The Importance of Play. I think it builds nicely off of what we described here today. I invite you to check out our website, foundrysc.com. And on there, you'll recognize all sorts of different opportunities to connect and maybe deepen your journey into rest and renewal. So thank you so much for joining us for the summit today, and may you be well.